International Medical Corps has about 6,000 employees working in 29 countries on 4 continents. We do the primary healthcare level at the community level all the way up to developing policies at the ministry level. My role now is to oversee all of our programs worldwide, and that includes program setup to the oversight of the management of the program, grant acquisition, security, recruiting, logistics, technical aspects of the programs. It's about saving lives, relieving suffering, and capacity building training. And we focus on that in everything we do.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Torbay, for joining me today and agreeing to sit down. As I discussed with you earlier, we're talking about disaster resilience leaders and the traits and qualities that make effective leaders, particularly in disaster scenarios. So, first things first, tell me a little bit about your background. What brought you to where you are today?
I grew up in Lebanon during the war. I was 4 years old when the war started, so if you do the math, you'll find out how old I am. And I left Lebanon right after I graduated from college, so my whole youth was spent during the war in Lebanon. I left and I was 21, and the war had just ended. So I've seen nothing but war. And I went to Sierra Leone. I went to Sierra Leone for a 2-week vacation in West Africa. I didn't even know where Sierra Leone was. Sierra Leone sounded Latin American. I thought I was going to Latin America. There was no Google then, all right? I had to pick up the atlas. But I ended up in Sierra Leone for 2 weeks, and I got hooked. I loved the country. I got offered a job. I'm a civil engineer by background, so that's as far as you could get from, what I'm doing now. And I started working in Sierra Leone as a civil engineer, and I became a manager, and I took over a company, construction company. So I was in the business world for about 8 years. Then the senior vice president for International Medical Corps went to Sierra Leone during the Civil War to do an assessment. At that time, all the expatriate community had left Sierra Leone. The only ones that were left were a group of mercenaries that were fighting the war with the Nigerian peacekeeping force, and myself, and at that time my fiancée, who's now my wife. And I met him, and we got along very well. It was very simple. 2 expats in a hotel when there was absolutely nobody else, and the hotel was the only safe place in Freetown. And he asked me to volunteer just for 2 weeks to help him get registered in Sierra Leone because I had a lot of contacts, and I agreed. And he promised me he'll be back in 2 weeks. I didn't see him until like 18 months later. But within those 2 weeks, there was a cholera outbreak on an island. And being the only NGO in Freetown, basically it was just me, and I knew absolutely nothing about cholera. I knew absolutely nothing about health. I knew absolutely nothing about the organization or the NGO world. I didn't even know that this world existed. But the Minister of Health was a friend of mine. He said, "Rabih, we need your help." I said, "What am I going to do? I don't know anything about cholera." I said, "I'll give you a nurse. I just need someone who would go and check it out." I said, "Okay." We went to the island. It was during the rainy season. The seas were just a complete mess. It was a hand-dug canoe with an outboard engine. I went to this island. It was about 4-hour ride to that island. Got there. The community couldn't believe that they saw somebody coming. We went to the so-called clinic. It had no roof, no doors, nothing. The guy who was supposed to be in charge of the clinic was drunk. Kids were dying on the floor. I walked in, there was a child that was severely dehydrated. I looked at him, and you could tell he was still alive. His mother was sitting next to him. By the time I was done, touring the clinic, it took me about 7 or 8 minutes because there wasn't much to see. I came out, that kid was dead. This is when things changed for me. I went back, I said, "Okay, you know what, I want to help." Managed to get supplies, managed to hire some nurses, local nurses, taught myself about cholera as much as I can by asking different doctors and nurses what it's all about. We went back to the island, we set up a treatment program, and from having 40 to 50 people dying every day, within 3 days the number went down to 1 or 2. Within a week there were no more deaths on the island. So I got hooked. Then I started learning about writing proposals and how, I started learning about the NGO world, which is something I've never done before. I'm a businessman. I know how to make money, which played okay with the NGO world because, it's part of the funding. How do you make money for the organization? I became the country director for Sierra Leone programs, then regional director for West Africa, and when then same thing for Central Asia, managing Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. And when I came to headquarters, our CEO just handed me my cards. I was a deputy director at that time. She handed me my cards, said, "That's your new job." And we still laugh about it, that I argued with her. I said, "I don't want this title. I don't want the responsibility. I'm not ready yet." She said, "No, you're ready." I guess she saw something in me I didn't see in myself.
Is there a particular time you can think of where you specifically exhibited qualities of an effective leader, where you sat back and kind of went, "Yeah, I did a pretty good job there"?
There were many situations. Going back to Sierra Leone, one example, when the rebels attacked the capital in Freetown, we had about 12 expatriates and about 200 national staff in Freetown, and we knew that it's going to be really, really bad, and it was critical to get the staff out and evacuate the staff. And I had the option of being on the first helicopter out of the city. Obviously, I didn't do that for many reasons, but one of them is I would never leave a place leaving any of my staff behind. That's absolutely out of the question. It's like the military, leave no man behind. I would never, ever leave any place with my staff behind. We were getting shot at, myself and the driver, from one house to another, gathered all the expats, took them to a safe house, managed to get them a boat and get a helicopter to take us up country, which is about 8-hour drive, and it was impossible to drive. The helicopter pilot was completely crazy. Bullets were flying all over the place. He went down, picked up our staff, we got them all out, and I made sure, I left after everybody has left. The same, similar things happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I think, one thing that's very important to any leader is also risk-taking. You do not take risks, you're not going to get anywhere in life. And as a leader, you have to take certain risks. Obviously, calculated risks. I'm not saying, jump off the plane without a parachute, but you have to take certain risks, and that's in terms of, taking risks in terms of decision making. Where do you go? How do you set up a program? What kind of, do we go to Libya the day the fighting starts? Do we go to Iraq before the fighting starts? Those are risks, but you look at them and you say, you know what, we're going to do it. Because if you don't, you're no different than the 98% of the rest. And willingness to take a risk for the sake of your staff, just to make sure that they see that you care about them, is also very important. So that risk, that's my advice to anybody who becomes in a leadership position. If you're not willing to take a risk, you shouldn't be there. Get out of the whole leadership position.
In addition to that, what other pieces of advice do you have for would-be leaders out there?
Sometimes people tend to overthink things. We all have an instinct in us. I think following your instincts once in a while would take you a long, long way. You have to be opportunistic. You have to see an opportunity and you have to seize that opportunity as soon as you can. You have to be strategic in your thinking. You always have to see a few steps ahead. You have to think a few steps ahead. You see a challenge, take it head on. As a leader, you have to show that you're willing to take on problems and at least try to solve them. And if you can't, you can't. And one thing that's very important, which unfortunately you see a lot of people not doing, is ask for help. Nobody's an expert at everything. God, I know myself, there are thousands of things that I'm completely clueless about. But a good leader is someone who surrounds himself with actually really smart people that will make him look good and make him look smart. And ask for help. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking for help. I go to all the staff here, other colleagues and other organizations, hey, how did you do this? Show me, tell me. If you don't ask for help, you'll never learn.
One of the things we've talked about a lot in our class is the importance of self-care. And I'm wondering, what are some of the strategies that you use to maintain solid mental health in a disastrous scenario?
It's, you know, everybody's got a different coping mechanism. There's, you know, people write books about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But at the end of the day, there are certain basic things that you need to do, but every person is different. What works for me might not work for you. For me, it's simple. One of the most important things is staying in touch with the family. That basically helps me cope with whatever situation it is, be it war. You know, I was recently in Libya where shells were falling, you know, 20 yards away from us. So, or Haiti during the earthquake, where you see, you know, death everywhere you work. So staying connected with the family helps. Once you're off duty, do anything to get your mind off work. You cannot take work home with you, even when you're in the field. You need to pace yourself. There are no superheroes here. You cannot stay there for a year and expect not to get burned out. And if that means sometimes we force people to take a break, we force them to take a break. Don't think about the 2 people that you lost today in the hospital. Think about the 200 people that you saved. That frame of mind helps you cope with it.
Earlier you brought up the word resilience, and this is actually something that we've talked about quite a lot in our class. And I'm curious, what is resilience to you?
It has, you know, different settings have different meanings. For me, resilience is the ability of the people to actually weather major disasters and to look after themselves. This is, it's a very simple interpretation for me. I don't go into the academic side of things. If people are able to handle a major disaster, and there are some disasters that nobody can handle, let's face it, but also at the same time they can cope and recover fast, that's resilience. You want someone who knows how to see a challenge, analyze it, and tackle it, and make sure you come out of that challenge on your feet. And if you fall, it's not, you know, they say it, it's a cliche. It's not how hard you fall or how high you fall. It's how fast you stand back up. It's critical, and that's also when you talk about resilience. That's very important. How fast can you be back up on your feet?